and how we sort of see faith representation. And of course, again, when it comes to looking at the communications work, we just see very little, if no representation at all. We really wanted to have this conversation this month and really say, where are all the Muslim women? Where do we see them? Where is representation? And what does that look like? And what do we need to do differently? How can we also invite all different types of voices to the table and make sure that we have all of that good thinking right in the heart of our businesses and in the way that brands talk to all their customers and audiences. And so to lead this conversation today, we have the amazing and wonderful Nicola, who I'm just so delighted to call a friend. She's the Editorial Director for Creativebrief. If you don't follow her on Twitter, her handle is in the chat box. As in her role, she oversees consumer trends, innovation, and interviews with industry and thought leaders from across the creative industries for all areas of business. She is a member of the Associate Board focused on growing the reach, relevance, and reputation of Creativebrief. She started her career as a financial journalist before specializing in technology, social media, and marketing. Her work has appeared across titles including Campaign, WPSN.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So you're not joining this call, yeah? So just in case. So I will just let them.
Can we have everyone's mics on mute, please? I'm just trying to see who we don't have on mute. Thanks. And she's Nikki's work has appeared across Campaign, The Guardian, and The Observer, and she's just an amazing advocate for diversity across all parts of the sector. She's also the co-founder of DICE, so that's Diversity in Conferences and Events, and she's been named as one of the 200 women redefining the creative industry by the Dots, and an Everyday Action Award from Bloom. Anyway, she's a complete trailblazer, but she's also the mother of a 5-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. And she's always on the lookout for new feminist fairy tales to add to her ever-increasing book collection. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to your host for today, Nicola Kemp.
Thank you so much, Ali, for the lovely introduction, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We've got an incredible panel today, and we've also got a great film for you to watch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly introduce our panel, and then I'm going to pass over to Hajar and she's going to put the film on for us, and then we're going to dive into this topic. So with us today, we've got Shelina Janmohammed. She's the best-selling author of Love in a Headscarf, a memoir as growing up as a Muslim British woman. Her debut children's book, I've got some product placement behind me, I've actually put it on my bookshelf so you can see it, is The Extraordinary Life of Serena Williams. If you don't have it, get on Amazon and definitely get that, which tells the story of the world's greatest tennis player. She's also the Vice President of Ogilvy's Islamic Marketing, the world's first bespoke global Islamic branding practice for building brands with a Muslim audience. Then we have Tahir Chaudhary. Tahir, if you could have a wave. I don't know why I'm waving to show you a wave. Still not good at these online events. She's in her 5th year at Oxford University, and she is heavily involved in the university's Islamic Society. She's passionate about creating and being part of supportive spaces for Muslim women. So we're massively grateful to have her with us today. And then we have the brilliant Sophia Parker, and as we heard from Ali, it was her conversation with Ali that really sparked this event today. So we're all here today because of her, and she's Regional Director of Diversity and Engagement Europe and UK at McCann Worldgroup. She is really dedicated to building a culture of inclusion across the UK and Europe. And before this, she worked for over a decade in business development. And part of her real success there was really identifying the business gap. And she launched McCann Reach, which is a division specifically focused on helping brands target ethnically diverse consumers. And then last but not least, we have Arif Miah, and he is co-founder and creative strategy director at the award-winning creative shop Mud Orange. And he is, if he could give us a wave, he's also the proud owner of some serious lockdown hair. And after making the transition from consultancy, so he worked at EY, he joined Ogilvy and then later Odd. And at Mud Orange, he's really worked on creative strategy, but also creating really groundbreaking reports, such as the Great British Ramadan, to really help brands engage with the Muslim consumer. So before we all kick off this discussion, we've got a video from Zara Mohammed, who is the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Great Britain. So Haja is just going to play that for us first.
Sure. Just going to share my screen.
If I can be a bit cheeky,
this is Zara Mohammed.
Oh,
is it worth just telling everyone who may not be familiar with Zara why she's so exciting to have here? She is the very first female leader of the Muslim Council of Britain, which is the UK's largest body representing all different kinds of Muslim groups. So she's absolutely groundbreaking, and I guess she's an inspiration for a lot of the conversation here today.
thank you very much. I'll play the video.
The Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. I'm delighted to share with you some of my reflections on the portrayal and I guess the representation of Muslim women in the media, and maybe give some hopeful insights and advice on how we can make it a little bit better. I guess the first question is really around what is the impact of lack of representation? You know, many Muslim women would find it very difficult to generally in mainstream media see themselves in a positive role. Often Muslims generally are usually the villain or associated with a negative stereotype or characteristic, either relating to extremism or terrorism, or something happening abroad internationally and the rights of women, or we're veiled, or it's very homogenous, it's very linear, and it's very much that we are all just the same. And for women particularly, there's a lot of stereotypes on who we are and what we can be, and it's people have defined this about us without us. And I found this particularly with my election as the first female Secretary General. I was asked if the men would really let me lead, and if this was just something that was a good PR stunt. And this was really coming from not within the Muslim community but beyond it, out with it. I was getting asked questions around my legitimacy and why did I run, and what did I think I was, why was I the first? And this conversation was just about pinpointing me and taking something really positive and strong and turning it into something a bit skeptical and a little bit hostile and a little bit doubtful, I would say. So I think for Muslim women, we definitely feel this kind of projection of very negative stereotypes and tropes around who we are and what we can be, and we're not included in that conversation. The diversity of Muslim women who wear headscarves and who don't, our ethnicity, our background, our job occupation, the fact that some of us are CEOs, some of us are sporting heroes, others are lawyers, others are mothers, our sisters, daughters, we have all these different roles and in their fullest diversity and breadth, yet we are just portrayed as kind of one very kind of, this is one stereotype, so she's all black, stays at home, whatever it is. So I think there's an absence of us. And what makes this really harmful is the fact that, as younger women, young Muslim women now are growing up, they're, the impact that social media has had on how they feel about themselves and their religion, the confidence issues, the low self-esteem, the not taking on those future opportunities, feelings of alienation or isolation. And I think being someone who represents, that younger demographic and group, it's so important that we inspire young people, we inspire young women. They are future leaders for everyone, not just within our own faith community, but for everyone. I think there's a global conversation around women, and I think it's absolutely detrimental to the potential that we could see in all of these different spaces and the change makers, that we're not facilitating a space for. I think for media owners and advertisers, the first step is acknowledging there is an issue. So if we're there, that's great. I think the second step is about inviting Muslim women into the conversation, to the discussion, to the focus group, and making an effort to actually understand the belief and the faith, and to understand how diverse our communities are. And when you're coming up with an advertisement, or you're coming up with a product, or the Muslim market is massive, billions of pounds. We're some of the biggest donors when it comes to charity in Ramadan alone. And I'm sure maybe some of the other panelists will be speaking about that. But we're a consumer. We like to spend, and we like products are within our ethics and values, our beliefs and principles, and especially where we're represented fairly and equally. So I think that it's about bringing Muslim women into that conversation. Let us define ourselves, but be open to the fact that we are diverse. We're not a homogenous block. And I think it's also really important to get the branding right. If your branding is just, when you're talking about ethnic minorities, we're so diverse within ourselves. First of all, do you even reflect diversity? What is the language you use? What about the cultural sensitivities? Are you aware of them? Are you aware of our calendars, our holy months that come up, our dietary needs, our language, and the way we, the morals and the value system? I think if you really want to connect to this kind of customer base, you've got to first relate to it, and that can only begin with a relationship and speaking to grassroots organizations like ourselves and many others to find out, well, what are the issues Muslim communities are facing, or what's important, what's topical, what about young people, what's important for them. They're now earning more, they've got more disposable income, and they are part of a growing professional Muslim class of individuals, and they're established, And so there's definitely something really important there in connecting to your advertising. And I guess in terms of our 3 actions that I'd like them to take now is, I think first is really is start the conversation now. Go out and think about a couple of different organizations you can speak to, or and think about the diversity you can have. Ramadan is coming up now. Is there even just a message you can share on Twitter to say, hope Muslims have a wonderful Ramadan? And, is there something that you can do to support, acknowledge that month? And I think when you do have employees or, clients or base that are Muslim, I mean, you've already got the help there. Ask, can you help us understand? We're interested. And I think people really welcome that, and they are quite keen. So I think it's just about begin that outreach today, share a message of support and acknowledgement, and then think about in the long term, not just doing the tokenistic stuff that we'll do it once and that's it, but how do we establish these longer term relationships and really think about the longer brand? What do you want your brand to represent? And if it's really about diversity, then are you willing to do the work? I certainly hope you will be. So that's kind of everything for me. I think my experiences so far is that, there's so much potential. I'm really hopeful. I think there's already so much great work happening to make media marketing and advertising more inclusive, more diverse, and I'm happy to support you all in that cause, and would welcome any conversations post this event. And we are in a pandemic, and people are really going through tough times, so I think the opportunity for connection is important, and if you can do that through your work, then that would be a really valuable thing at this time. So that's everything from me. Is Janmohammed from the Muslim Council of Britain. I hope the rest of the programme is great, and I look forward to your recommendations and suggestions as to how MCB can also be of use in this endeavour. Thank you so much.
That's a great point for us to jump off from, that point of nothing about us without us. But I just wanted to touch on something in terms of the representation of the panel that we have today, because obviously that was mentioned in terms of, Muslim women aren't a homogenous group, and we don't have a Black Muslim woman on our panel today. So we just wanted to be really upfront about that. So Shelina, I'd love to sort of get your view as to where we are as an industry, that point around diversity and diversity of our own panel as well, and how we create the right conditions for Muslim women to enter the industry.
First thing really to say is what a great conversation, and it's so glaringly obvious that we need to have this conversation that I'm gobsmacked that we haven't had it before. So I think that in itself is somewhat shocking, but also noteworthy that we're beginning this conversation. And it's been really great that in particularly in 2020, but in the recent years, we have had a growing momentum behind what does it mean to be diverse? How can you be inclusive? How do you ensure voices in the room feel empowered? But the vectors of those have typically been around race and ethnicity, around sexual orientation, and around gender. But in that, too often, what we've lost is religion as a very important marker of self-identification. And, you know, there's a bit of me that wonders if, particularly in Britain, we're just a bit uncomfortable thinking about religion, but also because in Europe and North America, religion as a marker of self-identification has become less and less significant. So we see that the rise of people who identify as none has increased. And yet our research, particularly at Ogilvy, has shown that Muslim identity is particularly powerful. And, you know, Muslims will say, even if they are non-observant, that there is something about their Muslim identity that's important to them. And that, of course, goes hand in hand with the fact the reality of Muslim experience, given the rise of things like Islamophobia, sadly, which is focused very much on Muslim women, is also rising, which means that actually, if we want to talk about inclusion, we do have to be bold. We have to do the thing we're uncomfortable about and talk about the fact that faith for Muslims, religion and religious identity is very important. So I think that is the first barrier that we need to overcome. And that there are therefore constraints and restrictions in the same way that other groups face them in terms of how they enter into industry, particularly the cultural industries and the storytelling industries, which shape our understanding of the world. If you can't get Muslim women into those places which shape our stories, and the stories are shaped about us, we're trapped in this, you know, circle of doom. So I think the first thing, and I will let the other panelists add their contributions, is for us to actually have this conversation, no matter how uncomfortable it might make us, and whatever stereotypes we may come up against in talking about it, that Muslim women need to be part of the conversation. Muslims generally need to be, but at the intersection of that, Muslim women are bearing the brunt. And how do we make the industry feel like it's for Muslim women? You know, I talk about being a Muslim woman in advertising, and people are like, are you really allowed to be in advertising? And why would you want to do that anyway? So I think that's the first thing that we need to get over, and this conversation is a great place to start.
Thank you so much, Shelina. And with that conversation in mind, Sufia, I'd love to bring you in here, because this conversation is really, really happening because of you. So do you feel that this conversation is overdue from an industry perspective? I mean, why do we need to be talking about this now?
Thank you, Nikki, and you know, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see some familiar faces and new faces as well. I think the simple answer to this question, Nikki, is yes, this conversation is overdue, and I think Shelina touched on it. And I'll tell you the reasons why. Firstly, Muslim women, we're not a niche, you know. We are members, I refer to myself as a Muslim woman, you know, we are members of the fastest growing religious group on earth that constitutes more than 12% of the world population. So to bring it to home from a UK perspective, we're talking 7% of the UK population is Muslim. So let's talk about intersectionality and women, simple maths. So we're saying if there's about 4 million Muslims, 50% of us are women, right, in UK alone. And not to mention the value of the Muslim pound, or, you know, or the halal lifestyle. And there's been some great research to back these figures up. But the halal lifestyle in UK alone is, you know, we're talking about 20 billion pounds. So that's just a quick kind of data check for, you know, any of you are into numbers to strengthen the business case to why this, you know, why we're connecting on this topic today. So despite these, you know, powerful numbers and the spending, significant spending power, the Muslim consumers are continuously being overlooked and not spoken to or seen in a way, I believe, that, you know, that is progressive or inviting. And I think this is a direct consequence, and Zara touched on it, Shelina touched on it, and I feel like this is going to be a bit of a common theme in amongst the panelists today, is, you know, the media continues to feed into the narrative of whom they believe and want us to believe the Muslims to be. So, you know, there's nothing new that I'm revealing here, but the traditional default is that the Muslim woman in particular is oppressed, you know, is victimized. And the hijab, the headscarf, is, you know, acting as a representation of her burden rather than an expression of who she truly is. And I'd like to go as far as saying, you know, Muslim women, Muslims and Muslim women are othered and made to feel that, you know, they don't belong or matter. Therefore, it's okay not to communicate with her and totally be dismissive of her. So I think this conversation has great potential to be even more exciting if brands started to explore and understand, firstly, how diverse the Muslim woman is and how the hijab is not an expression of her oppression, newsflash, but an act of worship, and it's truly liberating. So if you don't believe me, ask any of your, you know, Muslim friends, colleagues, neighbors, parents on the school run that you know, or, you know, that actually what does the hijab signify for her as a Muslim? And you will immediately notice a disparity between what is being portrayed and what is actual the reality is. I found this interesting. There was a report by the Women and Equality Select Committee, and it was going back in 2016 now, noted that, you know, they were exploring the barriers women face entering into the workplace. And one thing they noted when it came to the Muslim women was actually they are facing a triple penalty that is impacting them. So it's firstly, it's being a Muslim, having a Muslim identity. Then it's being a woman. So that is another factor. And then, you know, often from, I think it's been discussed already, and we touched on them about, you know, from minority ethnic background. So, you know, just to conclude on that question, Nikki, I think with such, you know, powerful insights on the consumer spend of the Muslim woman and the growing, you know, demographic of the Muslim woman, I don't believe that brands can continue to afford to ignore, overlook, or, you know, not engage with such a significant group of people with immense, not just buying power, but, you know, who, it's about time, I think, as an industry, we challenge the stereotype of the Muslim woman as an industry.
Thank you so much. And that theme of othering, Arif, I'd love to bring you in here. Can you share your experience in the industry? I mean, have you had that kind of experience? Do you still think there is tokenism, and how has that impacted you personally? Because I feel like we have to address this in the work, but also within the industry to get that progress.
Yeah, it's really interesting because actually I'll share a really funny story. So when I first made the shift from kind of business consulting to creative work and strategy, when I first joined the building, a lot of people thought I was the IT guy. It was hilarious, you know, oh, I need my password changed, or can I have a new mouse? And I'm like, I can't really help with that. But like sometimes I actually knew how to reset the password, but you know, I kind of avoided it. But like it's really interesting when it comes to like tokenism, because I think like Sophia, you mentioned like a really, really good point around the business case, because I feel like in our industry, there's a big focus on the supply side of diverse talent, which has improved, especially after like the Black Lives Matter movement in the UK. And there's a lot more being pushed in, but the attitude in our industry is, it's almost like a good thing to do. It's my good deed. You know, I've employed someone, amazing, pat on the back, and it's great. But a lot of the cultural dynamics within agencies or even brands, it kind of forces people to assimilate. So yeah, you might have more of a colorful book of faces, but do you really have diversity of thought? And that's why I really think it's quite lopsided. It's towards let's increase the supply, but there's no demand. You know, where's the education for brands? Where are brands actually stretching beyond their existing insights and pools and really stretching their strategic thinking, which just doesn't exist. And sometimes it is like when they rely on brands, it is the blind leading the blind. And what I really want to see more of is brands is like, yes, it's good to have more people from more diverse backgrounds in agencies. Yes, get the stats up. But what does that really mean if they're walking in and they're just being like everyone else? You know, they need to be empowered. There needs to be more robust thinking on empowering brands to make the right decisions too. And also quite recently, I've been seeing a lot more of diversity consultants being brought in, which I think is great. But when it comes down to creative work, you know, you also need practitioners. You need people who can write strategy. You need people who are creative. You know, you need people who are designers. And they almost see the diversity consultant as the walking focus group, where if we've got that person in, it's all good. In reality, that's just one piece of the puzzle, and it needs to live beyond just being a token individual.
Thank you very much. And Tahir, I'd love to bring you in here and your experience as a Muslim woman at Oxford. Could you share with us your own view and on what it means to build a really truly inclusive environment, and any kind of personal pressure that you've faced in that ecosystem?
Yeah, so based off what everyone was saying about how, you know, Muslim women are seen in the media so far, one thing I found at Oxford, at a place like Oxford, which is really white and middle class, was that I was the representative of like Muslim women, as in they're from, you know, private schools or, you know, the middle class, and they don't come across people like me. So I was, you know, the first person that they saw as a Muslim woman. And I just knew straight away they othered me. They would see the physical difference. And I think that's particularly if you wear a hijab. Anything else, you know, it's not as like prominent as, you know, putting a hijab on and telling someone I am Muslim. And then straight away, they'd either you could just see the way they interacted with me compared to other people. And I just felt like, you know, the culture in university is about drinking and going clubbing, and you were just othered straight away from the get-go. And it wouldn't just be with peers, but even going into my lecture theatre, and all the academics were, you know, white middle class people. I've never seen a Muslim woman in any of the field that I've been in, other than, you know, like doctors. But so yeah, it can be quite othering, and you do feel quite isolated. And it's a bit of a shame, because, you know, I'm you know, born and brought up in London. I am literally British, but you're still othered because of how you look, and the media definitely plays a role, because I had people tell me that they thought I'm one of those oppressed people, and they'd ask me why I wear it, and, you know, it literally is based off what they read on the Daily Mail or the Telegraph. So yeah, I definitely think this kind of, you know, our representation actually has a massive effect on how I'm treated. And I'm not anywhere near like the advertising. I'm a medical student, I'm nowhere near that, but even the way I'm kind of like looked at is based on, you know, what people have seen in the media.
Thank you so much. And I think it's so important to recognise the role that the media has in all aspects of life, in terms of those kind of stereotypes. And I really want to sort of build on that, because there's obviously a business case for greater representation. But Sufia, you have a really powerful example on a human level, with Cadbury's and personalisation. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Of course, yeah. It's funny because when I first shared this story, I didn't even realize how this experience is fundamentally a great example of both revealing of how brands, you know, continue to operate on blind spots, and also and like you said, Nikki, on a human level, you know, it's you know, it's not a great example. I'm just going to put it out there. It's a bit uncomfortable, but here it is. I was shopping with my children. This is when, you know, there was a slight ease in lockdown, and we were hoping for the world to have changed in, you know, that in 2021. So there was an ease in lockdown. I'm in the shops with my children, and there's that, as you go to pay, there's always that temptation to buy extra bit of chocolate, you know, and all sorts. So there was this rotating stall of Cadbury's chocolate stall that, you know, you can buy a bar of chocolate and eat it with your name on it. Right now, as a Muslim woman, as a consumer, I know not to bother approaching any stall which has got personalization, you know, i.e. names on it, because obviously my name is not going to be included in that. Though I do admit, when I was a child and still unsure about my identity, I used to anglicize my name and used to pretend, rather than being Sophia, I was Sophie. It didn't work, because obviously I wasn't Sophie, but there I was trying to feel like I belong and I fit in and a brand remembered me. But nonetheless, my children are obviously of a younger age, and they are still trying to navigate the world and
Thank you for sharing that. And we've heard throughout this discussion, Tahir mentioning it with the academics and the fellow students at Oxford, the cost of lack of representation. There's a real emotional cost to that. But you said something really powerful when we were planning this talk about your own expectation when it comes to representation. Could you share that with everyone?
Sorry, who's that question to, Nikki? Sorry, I missed that. Is that
you, Sophia? Sorry.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi just froze for a bit. I was like, I think people are looking at me.
Just when we were talking before this event, you said something really powerful about what your expectations for representation are. Could you share that with everyone?
Yeah, of course. I think we're at a point now, from an industry point of view, from a representation point of view, it's a critical time where all voices matter. And I think we've kind of keep referencing to say othered. I think Muslim women are here and we're speaking and we are wanting to be heard and we're wanting to be seen. And we are wanting to be, to not have to conform to the stereotypes that the media continues to want us to pigeonhole us in. And I think, you know, representation means everything, and we know that. We know the value of representation. So, you know, it's a business imperative, and I'm very much always driven by the conversation being from a business imperative point of view. I don't think there is any organization, you know, that's present here on the call today, and from an industry point of view, that doesn't have growth as part of the number one objective, right? So if we're all signing up to having a successful business year and business growth, then let's be truly inclusive and have a representation that is super inclusive, that is not giving anything but feelings of shared purpose, belonging, connection on a deeper, meaningful way, that is there to create the positive change that, you know, I very much am excited about to be in this industry at this moment in time. Because going back to the right initial conversation when we started, we're having these conversations, and I think that's the best way forward for us.
Thank you. And in terms of building on that positive momentum, Shelina, could I bring you in here? Because I'd really like to talk about the lack of Muslim women in leadership positions, because we talk a lot about talent pipeline, but do we have a problem with retaining that talent as well?
So I think one of the challenges when we're having this conversation around representation and, you know, how do Muslim women find a space in the storytelling and creative sectors, is on the one hand, representation is important. Everybody who knows me and knows my work knows that that's one of the passions that drives me, is about extending the equality of the consumer experience. Because actually, if we're going to have democracy and inclusion, then actually it might sound trite to say it, but having as great a shopping experience as everybody else is fundamentally a right that everybody has. So there, you know, there is an important impetus around representation, but I think it is important that we say that not all Muslim women, like all other underrepresented groups, want to be there to represent. And that's a terrible burden on people when they come into an industry. You know, we have to talk about their creativity, their aspiration, their talent, their opportunity, their contribution, their potential. And that burden is very weighty when you become the only person in an organization and everybody kind of strolls down the corridor and kind of throws something at you and says, is that all right for you to sign that off? Or, you know, can you explain the whole of Islam to me in one sentence? Or, you know, you kind of have everybody strolling by going, gosh, are you really hungry in Ramadan? Can't you even drink water? So I think, you know, there are some fundamental things we need to just lay out as the framework. The first is we are a commercial sector, and therefore we have a commercial opportunity, as Sophia was talking about, and a lot of the work we've done at Ogilvy. This is in the UK, a consumer group that spends, you know, contributes 30 billion, that spends 20 billion in the economy, that is very young and is desperate for brands to reach out. And many of the brands we work with in the UK are global. So there is a very strong commercial impetus. You know, I think everybody agrees that there's an argument from conscience. Nobody's going to say, no, it would be really bad not to be inclusive. You know, I think we've all won that argument. But there's also an argument for creativity, which is that we just make better work when you think about the way different people and their different perspectives rather than the same old, same old. And some of the challenges that I see in brands and in agencies, and just to be really clear, nobody is immune from this. We're all in this struggle together. Is, you know, I notice people kind of walk in the door and forget that Muslim women are people and have nuance. And somehow we're just recycling tropes. And I'm like, you guys are marketers. People pay you to have insights and nuance. Why do you forget that when it comes to Muslims and Muslim women? So I think that's the first problem. And the second one is we are an industry that is supposed to balance leading culture and reflecting it. And we're not doing either of them when it comes to Muslim women. So as Sophia was saying, you know, Muslim women make up at least 2 million people in this country. So why are we not leading the cultural conversation? And if we can't do that, we're not even reflecting it. And that is a huge frustration. If you're going to be a really great business that leads culture, that's what you have to learn to do. And the final, perhaps most galling point when you sit inside the industry and you see what's going on is that it still ends up being a diversity project. It's like you have a baseline, a norm, and then you try and kind of fit other people in. Whereas actually it's much more commercially impactful if you start with a kind of inclusive view of your audience and you solve or you create an insight that works for that audience, because that doesn't mean it kind of drops off your radar, or you don't have enough budget, or your client perhaps is uncomfortable with what you're doing, or it didn't make it through the creative planning process. You know, it's just a fundamental shift of how we approach our audiences. And none of this, I mean, all of this is things that we should be doing as an industry. So really the question is, why aren't we being as creative and commercially astute when it comes to Muslim women as we are for other groups? And I think if we can unlock that, and I think the question is, we just have so many stereotypes of Muslim women that, you know, once we unlock that, then I think we're going to be, you know, off and running.
Thank you. And Arif, I'd love to bring you in here in terms of unlocking that challenge, in terms of what agencies and brands can do differently when it comes to representation and holding the industry back. Because we talked before and you told us about a consumer segment called Brexit Becky and the need not to offend Brexit Becky. Can you tell us a bit about that and just your view if you think the creative process is fundamentally broken when it comes to inclusive representation? Because going back to Shelina's point, it sometimes feels like an add-on or a reverse engineer rather than a fundamental part of the creative process.
Yeah, definitely. Like I always say, with a lot of brands, when it comes to more diverse audiences, they have reactions and not strategies. It's up. Let's repurpose our e-commerce shots and kind of put it out there without actually building for it. But yeah, definitely. And I think what it comes down to is fundamentally that the infrastructure within brands is completely outdated. If you're looking at the personas, you know, a persona, like for anyone that doesn't know, you know, a brand will usually have very particular personas or different audience groups. And like last year, you know, at Mad Orange, we were working on one of, you know, a really big household name fashion brand. And the campaign that we pitched, they said, oh, that's going to upset Brexit Becky. And we're like, who's Brexit Becky? I've never heard of her. And they said, oh, like, you know, she's not going to like seeing a dark-skinned woman as the lead model. We're like, you're ignoring 15% of the population here who come from ethnically diverse backgrounds for Brexit Becky. And even when you see like the, you know, case studies from Nike, when they first launched the hijab pro, yeah, they got negative backlash immediately, but the long-term impact on the brand was, you know, share prices reaching an all-time high and brand index and perception, you know, massively improving. And also, if you look at from a brand perspective, their marketing calendars are just agnostic of anything that they don't experience themselves. You've got the Christmases and you've got the Easters and you've got Valentine's Day, but you don't have Ramadans and Diwalis. And they really need to reassess on how do they map out the whole ecosystem of what it means to live in British life, you know. And it does come down to a lot of these brands. They look at agencies to guide that. Agencies are facing the same issues. And it really is the triangle of intermediaries, brands and agencies educating the whole process. And even at Mad Orange, you know, what we found over the last 2 years is we've had to squeeze out briefs from like non-alcoholic spirit brands to, you know, sportswear brands. I'm saying, this is the opportunity, get it in your head. And like with a sportswear brand last year, it kind of fell through, and then we really challenged them. And now in Ramadan, coming out within a global content theme, a content theme on their social media around, you know, when people aren't eating and drinking, all the muscle and all the gain goes. So how do you actually maintain that? And how do you, you know, with me, I put on 17 kg over lockdown. How do I lose that in Ramadan? I'm like eating, I make the most of it. And so actually is filling those gaps from a brand perspective, injecting those moments into the marketing calendar, building bespoke personas. So you're actually accounting for them from the offset. Because the amount of times it's been 2 weeks before Ramadan and we've been told, we've got some shots that we put on a website. Can we color in the arms so we can do some activity for Ramadan and, you know, reverse engineer hijab on a woman? And we're like, no, we're not going to do that, because first of all, you know, that's going to take a heck of a lot of skill, and a 2-week turnaround for e-commerce shops. Now we're not happy to do that. So it is really about internalizing it and pushing that. And I do really put the onus on agencies, people like us. If we're meant to be strategic, if we're meant to be insightful, let's guide the brands. You know, they're paying us, and also intermediaries. You know, we really need to be kind of, you know, pushing the status quo.
Thank you very much. And Tahir, I'd love to bring you in here, because the panel's really discussing the kind of importance of role models, but do you think that there is, in your perspective, do you still see like too many cookie cutter stereotypes, and when you're looking at like the media and what's around?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as in you never see people, as in like as a consumer, I don't typically see people like me in these kinds of, you know, for example, like gym wear or things like that. If I wanted to start going to the gym, I wouldn't know what to wear because it's not, you know, my kind of, you know, what I would be wanting to wear. It wouldn't align with my principles and things like that. And just in general, in the media, even when I'm clothes shopping, like small things, but they actually make a difference, especially when I do see like a Muslim woman or someone who, you know, dresses a bit more modestly, or when I look at like modest fashion that is becoming a bit more, you know, widespread nowadays. That it has made a difference where I'm like, oh, is this what everyone else has been able to have all these years? And I'm now only now in 2021 that I can, you know, also relate and also be part of that. So it's a really different consumer like experience when, you know, you see people like you and they actually are, people are catering for you, like the Nike hijab, definitely, like loads of my friends got that. And like, even I always thought I could never go swimming, but nowadays we're getting, you know, clothes for us. It's just small things like that that I wrote off. Like if me and my friends ever go anywhere, I'll sit and watch them in the pool or whatever. But now it's a different experience, and now I feel like, wait, I didn't even know that I should have been asking for that. Like now that I have it, I'm like, oh, why did we not have this earlier? So I think it is really important. I think as you know, we are the widest spread, like growing religion, there's going to be more and more Muslim women, and we're going to be wanting it more. Like my generation are going to be wanting this more, and the demand is only going to get bigger, especially when we now realize that we can ask for this and we are going to ask for our rights. So yeah, it is very important to see us in the media and basically see brands, you know, kind of catering towards us. And yeah, I think I am just tired of the cookie cutter stereotype of that tall, skinny white girl. Like there's only so much you can relate to her for people like me. So yeah, it's definitely very important.
Thank you for that insight. And just looking at some of the questions and comments we've had, somebody said, working in an agency, we need to convince our own teams before we can convince our client, which ultimately comes down to sales volume. How do you convince someone that including the 15% is of more benefit of the 85%? Has anybody got any advice for the audience around that?
Yeah, I've got probably some input on that. So it's really interesting because the biggest challenge that I had before, you know, starting Mild Orange was, as a strategist, I need access to data and insights, and the big research panels just weren't chucking it out. And the first thing that Allah's our ECD did was we invested a heck of a lot of money building a bespoke panel where we can speak to various different people in real time, and which answered a lot of the things that was a barrier for our own teams and client teams. Also, the second part of that question, which was including the 15% is more benefit of 85%. It just shows, like, in such a tech-driven world today, it doesn't have to be either/or. You know, there's marketing funnels and there's different stages of the marketing, journey, that if you are scared of including the 15% from the outset, you don't have to start from above the line work. It doesn't need to be a massive brand statement that you shout out, because a lot of times, you know, you can empathize that it probably is scary, but there's so many different elements to it. How do you target digitally? How do you target regionally? How do you have bespoke messaging for a moment that can be quite segmented? Because that's what we've done, you know, with different drinks brands, is we do say, you know, a segmented content approach where only this people would see it, and let's see the business uplift, which has been great. So, you know, when people are scared, remove the threat. It's not about contaminating your brand, which a lot of people think about. It's extending your brand in more clever ways.
Thank you. And we've had like quite a few comments and questions, and I'm aware of time as well. But there was a heads up, if anyone knows the Cadbury's and Mondelez marketing team, sounds like they need some FaceTime with Creative Equals. So yeah, we'll follow up on that. But just with that time in mind, we really wanted to talk about, what we can do to make Muslim women feel more included in the workplace, because that's really going to improve the work as well. So I really wanted to turn to the panel really to leave the audience with like an action point to think about, advice, a piece of advice to brands that better represent Muslim women, or whether it's about making more education about the industry and it being available as a career choice. So Shelina, I'd love to kick off with you if that's okay.
Yeah, I think we've started a conversation about who is in front of the camera, so the casting. But what we really need are people behind the camera. We need creatives, strategists, account directors, and so on. And I think we need to collect all the Muslim women in the industry who exist, which admittedly, as far as we are aware, is not that many. So that's already a litmus test of the problem. And we do need to do some industry outreach and some role modeling, but we need to proactively go to where Muslim women are and talk to them about the fact that this industry is for us, partly because of the issues of representation, but partly because it's a fantastic industry and you get to do really exciting things, and that the barriers that we are perceived and real can be dismantled. And I think we need to proactively include that in our D&I strategies. As I said right at the beginning, we can be uncomfortable talking about religion, but it is very important that we do. And in doing so, we must ensure we are not perpetuating stereotypes. So some of the people on this panel will have seen the responses I got onto Twitter about Muslim women in advertising. And they said, well, have you asked your husband or brother or father's permission? I'm like, what is this? So we need to be proactively outreaching. We need to make sure that internally we make Muslim women feel comfortable. And we need to be creating and showcasing both our role models and our work to show that this is a place where Muslim women can thrive.
Thank you so much. And Sophia, could I bring you in here to get your advice as well?
Yeah, sure. It's really to build on what Shelina's already said. Just from my experience, of 20 years into this industry, I didn't always feel empowered to come forward with my identity. And, there are so many employee engagement surveys year on year that tell us, be it from an industry in or outside the industry, or that tell us that actually in order for you to better connect, enhance connection, have those heightened connections with your employees, how is it that we are enabling a culture where we're not having to wear a mask? And I know in this world, the mask means something very different, but how is it that I'm hiding my identity in order to feel like I belong here, right? Now, I did that. You didn't get the best work out of me when I did it, right? I was still being successful in my job role, but actually I wasn't being able to give it my 100%. And I couldn't tap in to that untapped potential, that extra 20% that you kind of reserve until you know that you're truly going to be valued, no matter in whatever setting you're in. How is it I feel that I'm an essential part of the decision-making process, right? That my voice is as of equal value to anyone else in that room. So having been on that journey, having that lived-in experience as a Muslim woman where I tried to conform, I was doing okay. But really my true self, and the minute I started thriving, was when I was comfortable in my own identity. Now that took quite a while, right? And I think it's kind of, I'm not going to put the blame on anyone other than myself, because it was me holding myself back. But as more experienced older woman in an industry, what I would like having some younger representation in the panelists and in the audience today is, how is it we can empower you as Muslims experienced in the industry? So from the day you enter, you are valuable, that you matter, that actually your lived-in experiences are of equal value to anyone else in the team that you're working in or organizations. So I think from a pure practical point of view, there are some quick wins, right? There's some etiquettes that we follow as, you know, as Muslim. What do I want to see? Well, I pray. I pray 5 times a day. So I would really like a space, a respectful space that is clean, that I can offer my prayers in, right? So most of us have a room, you know, within our agency organizations, when we go back to the work from a physical point of view, that you can dedicate a room for your prayers, have washroom facilities for your Muslims to perform, you know, ablution before their prayer. Friday, be mindful, there's a special focus on Fridays for Muslim to have congregation prayers. So be a bit more flexible, adapt to the timing. So you're not setting a meeting up, or you're not watching the clock if your Muslim colleague is slightly over an hour for their lunch break. Halal food in your catering, right? So I think that it isn't a lot to go by, but these little things add up to something so much more and meaningful, in order to really feel like you belong and you give it your 100%. My morale is boosted, you know, I'm just more engaged, I'm more connected, I want to give it my best. So I think there is a bit of like work to be done, but at the same time, I'm still yet again being very hopeful, because I think these are quick wins, and I think if we're committed, we can do this quite soon.
Thank you. And we've had lots of feedback on the chat of the fact that, you know, that trying to blend when we should really 100% be your authentic self. So I think your points have really struck a nerve with the audience. And Tahir, could I bring you in here and get your key takeaways today?
Yeah, so I agree with what everyone else was saying. I think some advice I'd give to someone who wants to be an ally is that it really means a lot to us, like as Muslim women, I think, when people see things from our perspective, and like, you know, acknowledge, you know, the privilege and the biases and sometimes the subconscious ways people like look at us, and having an ally that recognizes when, for example, as in the NHS, a lot of the time patients can be quite, I don't know, they'll be like, oh, I want to see a white doctor, I don't want to see you, or, you know, what do you even speak English, or they belittle you. A lot of the time that does happen. So in those kind of moments, if other people that aren't, you know, that maybe could recognize that, and maybe also like take a stand, not only just like, you know, recognize that it's wrong, but take a stand with us, like be on our side, and you know, say no, that's not okay. It's hard when you're the only Muslim woman and you're like, no, I need to pray, I need to do this. I think there's power in numbers. So like, if we had more people going, no, she does need to pray, and you need to give her time to go off and pray. I know there's patience, but, you know, find another way of like dealing with it. That, I think that would be quite powerful and quite useful, and it's something I found that is a bit missing at the moment, you know, people seeing things from our perspective, and like, you know, joining us on that kind of fight. It's hard to be the minority and to also fight for yourself. So it would be nice to have allies to like join us and, you know, be like, what do we need to do to help you? What can, maybe we should also send emails and things like that. So I think that would be quite my piece of advice to give to everyone.
Thank you so much, and I think that's such a powerful point for us to end on, because it's clearly this is the beginning of a conversation, and an important conversation to have. And Ali is noted in the chat about creating a group of everyone who's come from this event, and hopefully building on that. And I think right from the beginning, there's been some really key themes, but I think at the top of it all is nothing about us without us. So I just want to thank the incredible panel and Haja, who's curated this whole event today, and Ali, for just, and everyone who's taken the time out of their day to join in. I'm sure this is just the beginning, but thank you all for taking the time out to connect with us today. Thank you.
And just a massive shout out to you, Nikki, as well for hosting us all so perfectly and beautifully. And I think, yeah, I'm just noting in my head as we're talking, I don't think there is like a specific community around for Muslim women in the sector. Who would like one? Put your hand up. Or even just a Muslim community in general. You'd like one? Because I think if you would, let's set one up, and we can just, you know, if you'd like to kind of host a few events, do some networking, we can definitely kind of help organize that, because I think this has just been such a brilliant conversation today. And so thank you everybody who made it happen, and I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your Wednesday. I'm just so conscious of time, but I'm going to give you all a big clap. Let's give it, mics off, let's give everybody a massive cheer. Woo! Woo! Everybody, thank you so much. High five panel, thank you so much. It was really brilliant. So many incredible points.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it was lovely to meet all of you.
Likewise, likewise. It was just brilliant. It was brilliant because I think it's the first time we've actually had this conversation from, you know, I don't know, Shelina, Arif, you know, if you've had from your industry, you know, from your organization, but it's definitely the first time I've been involved in such a conversation. So thank you for hosting.
Yeah, thank you for hosting. Arif and I have had some backroom chats, moans, creative brainstorming, but then he left me, so I'm not sure what to make of that.
I agree. I think this is super important, because I guess like going, you know, spending the last 6 years here in this industry, it has felt lonely a lot of the times, where you feel like you have to fight your own battles. You know, even like prayer spaces. You know, at my last job,